Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel on Meat Without the Moo. Are consumers buying it? As Thomas introduced me, I'm Tony Hunter. I'm the moderator for this wonderful panel of luminaries we have here today. As a little bit of background, I'm a food futurist, and what I do is I help companies understand how new technologies like our plant-based technologies are going to affect their business and impact them in not only 5 years, but 10, 20, or even 30 years' time. So I'm here with my futurist hat on to help answer not only the question of are consumers buying it now, but will consumers continue to buy that into the long-term future, and looking at some of the scenarios that, of course, Thomas outlined for us. So what I'd like to do is just get our panel just to briefly introduce themselves and why they're on the panel. Denise?
Hi everyone, I'm Denise Hamblin, National Sector Head for the food and beverage sector at Colmar Brunton. So we do consumer research, and I've been lucky enough to champion the Millennium Monitor, which is a monitor tracking social trends and social values in Australia since 1999, and it reveals a lot of interesting things about consumer motivation and consumer behaviour, and I'd like to contribute some of that today.
Thank you, Denise. Cale?
I'm Cale. I'm a plant-based restaurateur. I'm a product manufacturer, and I advise Woolworths on plant-based issues.
Hello everyone, great to be here with you all today. My name is Shama Sukul Lee. I have a startup called Sunfed, which makes meat without the animal, which tastes fucking delicious.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrew Ive. I'm the managing partner for Big Idea Ventures, and we scour the world to find the best food companies that develop plant-based and cell-based products, and ideally companies which produce fucking delicious food.
Well said, Andrew, well said. Well, look, why are we here talking about plant-based meats today? Vegetarian burgers have been around for a long time, but we've reached now the stage where we have plant-based products which are seeking to mimic real conventional meat. So that is the change now compared to where we are in the past, that we have products that are designed for everyone, not just designed for a vegetarian or flexitarian lifestyle. So what I'd like to do is just ask on to Denise, and just ask Denise, following on from Thomas's research, what are you seeing? I mean, is this plant-based stuff a fad? Is it going to go down scenario one where, it's a bit, just have it a few times a week, or where are we going to go?
I love hearing what Thomas has to say, because it really backs up the empirical evidence that we've been generating ourselves. Studying human behaviour and studying human values in Australia, we see that things are rapidly changing. So we have been in a time where the majority of us have these conformity values, pretty conservative. I'm looking for a place to drop the F-bomb in here. But, where we really value safety and security, familiarity, and we're not very likely to want to try new things. But that's changing, and we're really being led by our millennials in Australia, and really pushing into another time and another set of values, which are a more rebellious set of values, very courageous, really willing to start over all again, find a new way and find a better way. And the two probably leading motivations here are health and the environment, so sustainability.
So you're seeing this as being it's not a fad, this is not something that's going to come and go, and in 12 months' time we won't be talking about it anymore?
Well, it's only just begun, really. We have 25% of Australians that have kind of moved into this space and are really kind of forging the way. But the rest of us are actually following behind, so Gen X and then the baby boomers as well. So no, the longevity is definitely there, and I think, we have seen in other categories, whether it be in milk and so forth, and a lot of success and a lot of growth there. But as Thomas was mentioning before, we've got so much impetus with the WHO, with the UN, with lots and lots of different reports around health and the environment coming out. All happening at the same time, that we're looking for a better way as well.
Yeah. And do you think these foods are too processed? What are you hearing the purchase reasons from consumers? Are they worried about it being processed, or do they have other drivers as well?
I think process, it's a really interesting question. I think in the past, in the last decade, we've really defined health as anything that's been natural, and we've looked to kind of take everything out, all the levels of processing out. Reduced all of the nasties out of products and know exactly what's in it. But now what we're looking for is functional food. So it's not so much about how a product was grown or how it was made. It's more about what a product can do for us, what's good for us and what's good for the planet. So a certain level of processing, if it's actually ticking all the other boxes, is actually not going to be too much of an issue in the future.
Because I think maybe that's, if you look at the Impossible Burger, I mean, that uses genetically edited organisms to make the heme, and it's got this processed side to it, but it sells through Burger King. So obviously a lot of other boxes are being ticked to balance off against those other concerns.
That's right. Well, if we're ticking a box for better health, we're ticking a box for sustainability, and we're ticking a box on taste, then I think the level of processing becomes relatively less important.
Great, thanks very much for that. Well, thanks for that. Denise, over to you, Cale. Building on what Denise has said, how are retailers handling, the consumer demand for plant-based meats?
I guess to answer this, I'll go a bit into my history.
Cale?
I had a vegan grocery store and restaurant before it was cool to have one. And at the time this is probably 10 years ago, we were dealing with a product range that was all from overseas. The quality wasn't a particularly important thing. It was really just about it being available. So the consumers were giving very biased feedback when it came to these sort of products. They were saying everything was great all the time. It was really hard to get real feedback. So as things have evolved now and flexitarians have got involved in the market and more discerning customers have got involved, we've seen product quality improve and the demands of those customers improve. So what is incumbent on retailers now is to find very good products. They can't, especially the major retailers, the first purchase for a lot of these products will be with them. And if the product quality isn't high, the product will fail and this movement will slow down because of that quality problem. So
I think that's certainly, we were talking about before, I've tried some of the products coming out of major retailers like Woolworths and Coles, and they really shouldn't be on the market. They are that bad, and I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, but there's no doubt in my mind some of these products really are bad. What, the retailers bear a lot of responsibility for that?
There's definitely a challenge at the moment because the demand's spiking and the amount of products available for retailers to range is fairly low still. So they're going through a process at the moment of ranging everything. And that's quite dangerous in a sense that, like I said, the first point of contact for so many new consumers in this space is going to be that first purchase. And if we get that wrong, it's going to take time for that to sort of come out of the system. But it's going in the right direction at the moment, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think it's, thank goodness, 2 out of 3 people haven't tried plant-based products yet, as Thomas pointed out, and that's a good thing. I'm glad about that one. We get some quality products on the marketplace. And how do you see meat eaters reacting to these plant-based products? Take like your restaurant, Yavanna, there.
So, my restaurant in Brisbane, not that I'm super involved in it anymore, I'm travelling too much, but about 50% of our customers are not vegan that come into the restaurant. So that means that we have meat eaters eating there all the time. We focus on plant-based proteins. We do very indulgent food. So we do food that people would think would be processed. The product isn't overly processed, but it's high flavour, high quality. It's indulgence. And that's the key way of getting people into this space, I think, is focus on flavour. The major retailers, from my perspective, offer the convenience, and over time the price will come down. So we'll hit all those things, the price, convenience and taste.
Great stuff. Well, thanks for that, Cale. Sharma, I mean, you've heard Denise and Cale there. You've obviously started your own company. Tell us a bit about your journey and how things have changed in the plant-based space since the early days when you started the company to where you are now.
Yeah, the early days when I started, everyone told me, oh, it's not going to work. We didn't have this hype. But essentially, Sunfed started relentlessly focused on being the solution. Right? We want to be the solution. Now, what does that mean? So before I started Sunfed in my early life, I started breaking up with meat. I had a pretty bad breakup with meat, with lots of one-night stands, going back and forth. But essentially, I realized through that process, being a voracious meat eater and then letting it go, that there was a big gap in the market for anyone who was looking to minimize meat or take it out of their diet. That transition period, there was a really big gap. And the existing meat alternatives on the market just didn't cut it at all. For anyone who's a big meat eater, it all just tastes like tofu or, and I'm being kind. And also, I'm a very big clean eater. So to find something where I could get both the nutritional, nutrient-dense protein I was looking for, combined with that meaty experience, it was extremely difficult. So by the time I had an existential crisis, long story, and then when I started Sunfed, the goal was to create something that would actually work for people. And health was paramount. So health was the foundation Sunfed was built on, and next up was the meaty experience, and third part of it was scale. So the meaty experience for that, when I looked around in the market, there was nothing we could use off the shelf that could actually offer a very strong meaty experience.
And why did you choose chicken rather than beef or lamb or anything else?
Yeah, I chose chicken because chicken is essentially the staple protein of the world. It's the fastest growing protein by far globally, and in the Western markets it's accelerating. Essentially, if you look at the macro trends, very clearly what's happening is that in the Western market, so currently meat is growing, driven primarily by developing countries as their per capita income goes up. But in Western markets, the trend is people are moving away from red meat towards chicken or fish or some plant-based, but predominantly chicken by far. And the key driver for that is health, the number one driver that affects purchasing decision. Environmental reasons and animal welfare are a big bonus, but the primary driver is health. So essentially that was the question. That's where the trends are moving, whether we like it or not. And it's very strongly happening in the US, and all other countries generally tend to follow that. So we wanted to offer people, if you're moving from red meat to chicken, well, there's chicken-free chicken.
Yeah. And then so who is the consumer? Who are you targeting your products at?
We're targeting anyone who wants good, clean protein that tastes meaty, that tastes like meat.
Not vegans or vegetarians. This is for
We don't
mainstream
label,
consumers.
Yeah, I think labels are very divisive, right? I mean, essentially, we all eat food. We're looking for good quality food, but also with a nice experience. And so majority of our consumers to date are flexitarians, and that's why we're in mainstream supermarkets. So essentially the trend is that people want to eat more and more protein, but now more and more they don't want it from an animal.
Great stuff. Thanks, Shama. On to Andrew. Andrew, I mean, there's lots and lots of plant-based companies around. Everywhere you look, another one's springing up. Why VCs or our VCs continue to invest in plant-based companies?
Yeah, absolutely. We started raising our fund focused on plant-based foods and cell-based foods about 9 months ago, and we've already kind of raised $30+ million, and the investment is coming in from potential investors because they're really excited about this space.
So what do you look for in a startup? When you're going to fund someone, what are you looking for?
Sure. So I'm looking for a number of things. It's kind of backing up for a second. You kind of asked, why are we investing? Are we still investing in this space? If you consider the food categories out there, the entire market for food, right now, all of the sectors in food, which either include animal protein as a core component or as a byproduct, most of those sectors are empty of brands and of products and of innovation. Everyone's aware of burgers, everyone's aware of sausages, maybe meat crumble and milk, but absolutely every single category aside from that, lamb, seafood, cheeses, there's some coming through, but all of these other categories that include either animal products or byproducts right now are replaceable by plant-based foods. Right. So over the next 10 years, you're going to see a hell of a lot more, new brands, new products, new innovation filling in those white spaces. And that's just in the Western kind of food category. You start looking, and we invest in Asia and North America in particular. When you start looking at the Asia market, you've got so many different food types, food styles, how they use animal protein is so different than the West. All of those categories need plant-based alternatives and so on as well. And I think there are three key reasons why. One is obviously the 2-degree change in temperature, climate change. The other is animal welfare and how we're treating animals in the food system. And the third is health. You know, any organization you can think of, whether it's related to cardiovascular or cancer or, you know, whatever, are basically saying more plants in the diet is one of the key ways to improve personal health. So whether it's health of the planet, health of the individual, or health of the animal, you know, plant-based / a flexitarian diet is the way to go.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting comment you make there about the health, because if our food is how we maintain our health, what industry are food companies in? They're in the health industry in the end, so I think that's an interesting way to look at it.
I think they're starting to come around to that.
And with these entrepreneurs, these startups that you're funding, where do you see them fitting in the business ecosystem? How important are they to the future of food sustainability and meeting the SDGs?
So in Asia, for example, plant-based foods have been a very traditional, almost kind of 3-day, 4-day Buddhist holiday once a year, where people move away from animal protein for those 3 or 4 days, and they kind of eat tofu and so on. So 10 years ago, plant-based was basically tofu. Entrepreneurs have started getting involved in this category, and now there's almost nothing that entrepreneurs cannot do if they set their minds to it in terms of producing food that looks like an animal protein product, tastes like an animal protein product, but isn't. And I think that's the secret. It all comes down to taste. I talk a lot about my brother. My brother is a football hooligan. Proud of it, you know. Saturday he goes to his local football team and, you know, a few beers and fish and chips and so on and so forth. What we need is not to get the vegetarians and the vegans eating more plant-based food. We need to create great tasting plant-based foods, which the football hooligans are prepared to eat because it just tastes damn good. That's the secret.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think we were talking about before is big food companies, in my opinion, are innovation bankrupt. They take 18 months, 2 years, 3 years to get a product to market, and that just doesn't cut it these days. And I think you were saying these entrepreneurial companies can move quickly, they're agile, and also the thing is, you've got, I think, some big food companies invested in BIV.
That's right. One of our first investors was Tyson Foods, who are one of the world's largest animal protein companies, and they recently kind of announced that they've moved from being an animal protein company to being a protein company. They were launching a plant-based division globally, and we're kind of innovating around plant-based foods. And we're seeing a lot of large food companies getting involved in what we're doing because, you know, ultimately it's about bringing great tasting food to their consumers, whether that's animal-based or plant-based.
And it's just unfortunate that they're seen as traitors to the meat industry, isn't it?
Well, so I started off my career at Procter & Gamble. It took us usually about 2 to 3 years to bring a product to market. And when we got that product in the market, it was binary. Either the consumer loved it, and we'd spent the last 3 years doing the right thing, and we'd spent $10 million doing the right thing, or they hated it, and somebody's career got nixed, right? So I think what large food companies ought to be doing, and I'm not going to tell them how to do their jobs, but they need to start partnering and working with young companies earlier on in the cycle and supporting them all, helping them to kind of bring their products to market safely, consistently, in a good quality way, letting the consumer be the ultimate vote on which products survive and which products fail. And these large food companies can invest in and back and partner with those young companies who are so much better at bringing great products to market than they are, and their large departments and their $10 million budgets, which may or may not produce a winning product.
Yep, great stuff. So what I'd like to do now is I'll throw a few questions to the panel generally. I mean, we've talked about, with Denise there, about how things are processed or not, and there's a lot of talk about the nutritional value of these products. Who'd like to field the question of, what is the nutritional status of plant-based products?
Well, I mean, let's define what we mean by processed, right? So process is the word that we're using to showcase our dissatisfaction with the food industry, because essentially what's happened is in their aim to reduce price and scale, they're stripping nutrients out of food. And so it's refined white flour or white sugar, all of that. It's just being stripped of all its nutrients. It's a nutrient desert, and we're ending up with empty calories, which is causing a whole lot of problem.
Yep.
So let's just flip that. The question that's being asked is it healthy? Essentially, that's what they're saying when they use the word processed. Now, what does health mean? When you eat food, that's the fuel for your body. You have to put the right fuel in your body, right? So you can't put diesel in a petrol car. You have to get the right fuel. So essentially, can you eat something that is full of nutrients, is nutrient dense? Your body is able to get the nutrients out as quickly as possible, in other words, easily digestible, and then it comes out of your system. That would be the best thing you could eat. And essentially with Sunfed, that's what we've been building, that's what we've made. So it's completely nutrient dense. It's double the protein of chicken, triple the iron of beef, high in potassium, high in phosphorus, B vitamins, you name it, it's got it, right? But it means nothing if your body can't get it. So that's the problem with animal protein. It's very difficult for your body to digest that and get the stuff. It sits there, it causes a whole bunch of problems. So that's the question, that's the answer people need to understand. Also, not all meat alternatives are the same. There are some that are just not healthy, let's just say that. There are some on the market that are just not healthy or good. There are others that are better. So it's up to the consumer to filter out the ones they think that work for them, that are good, and the ones that don't. That's the democratic system. But consumers, the democratic system is only as good as the quality of your consumer, how aware they are, how engaged they are. So essentially, they need to do their homework.
Thanks, Shama. Anyone else?
I think there's a caution there that we need to make sure we focus on taste as well. There's a concern that if we focus completely on health in these products, we'll end up with a bunch of products that are very nutrient dense that taste really bad. And I always make the comment that we're sort of creating products that are less bad for you. So when it comes to meat alternatives, I don't think we need to totally focus on flavour. Flavour needs to be number one.
Disagree. I think you cannot take them apart. So, let's even forget what we think. Let's see what worked, right? So Sunfed, when it hit the market, big experiment. When I took it to the supermarkets in New Zealand, the two largest chains there, the initial reaction was, it does not look like chicken. Will it work? Because we make it from yellow peas, it has the golden color from yellow peas still intact, because we didn't want to strip it of nutrients. And I said, no, it performs like chicken. When you cook it, it cooks like chicken. It gives you everything you want from chicken. The consumers will get it. So it was this big, giant experiment in New Zealand that was a huge runaway success. We kept selling out, and we had to scale up to enter Australia with similar results. So that's the thing. Consumers don't know what they want until it's in front of them. Right? That famous thing, Henry Ford said, if I went to consumers and said, what do you want? They would have said faster horses. So essentially, it comes down to what you earlier said, the product. Is the product quality good? So meaty experience has to be there, but I think health is a big part of it because it's food.
Come on, you want to.
Okay, so
Just a quick one. Quick right of reply,
just
Cal.
a very quick one. I still think that taste needs to be number one. The health side of things will come along. If we don't hit taste first, we're going to fail. The market is not going to come along with us on these ones.
Thanks.
I need to add something on that too. Doing sensory testing and a lot of product testing, it's also important to note that taste changes. Taste preferences change over time. So what we've seen in Australia, and certainly in our work in the last 15 years, as we've been looking at it longitudinally, is taste preferences changing. Less salty, less sweet, more umami, wanting more craft kind of character. So, and it's a context of what you're actually eating. So it might be that health and taste may combine into a whole new experience.
Yeah, maybe. I would say texture is really important.
Sorry, can I just give back to Andrew? You had a comment first, because I think we need to keep moving on. So
You guys are good.
Well, I think there needs to be an interesting bit of training that goes on with customers as well around meat alternatives. One of the things that I've come across with putting products into Woolworths is we got some complaints around the size of the ingredient panel. My pushback to that was that we are creating a product from scratch that has ingredients in it. We can't put on a label beef, chicken, or pork. We have to put exactly what's in that product. So I think there is a bit of, because the ingredient panel is large, it doesn't necessarily mean it's an unhealthy product. It just, exactly. So there's a certain amount of training that's going to happen in this space in order to get consumers to come along for the ride?
Well, I think if we go all the way back and talk about the product, right? What are we trying to put in front of the consumer? So if we look at meat, and if we look at a lean cut of meat and we deconstruct it, we see that it's 75% water, 20% protein, 5% fats, carbs, vitamins, minerals. That's what a lean cut of meat is. So nutritionally, I think it has to be similar to that if you're trying to put something forward that offers that. Also, meat has a certain structure of long protein strands that are cross-linked that give it the texture. Now, without the texture, taste doesn't work. And so those two things essentially is what you're trying to create with plant proteins. How you do that, how cleanly you do that, how do you keep to that nutritional profile and get that very strong meaty texture with the long protein strands, that's the key differentiator, I think.
Yeah. Well, lots of opinions there. That's always great to hear that, but I think we need to move on to the next one now, which I think works off your one, Kale, which is the ingredients list. I mean, labelling. Does anyone think here that consumers are being fooled by the labels? You know, there's been complaints about Sunfed has a big chicken on it. People are going to pick this up and think they're buying chicken, get home and be horribly surprised, and they're going to actually be, you know, outraged that they've been fooled into buying something.
Well, I mean, in New Zealand, everyone was very happy with chicken-free chicken except the poultry industry. And we were taken to the Commerce Commission, and we won, right? So chicken-free chicken is very self-explanatory. I think we need to give consumers more credit. Yeah. It's chicken-free, but it works like chicken. Yeah. Just like soy milk has been around for a very long time, and peanut butter and whatnot.
Yeah. There's no butter in peanut butter. I was astounded. I couldn't believe that.
Wait till you see what's in hot dog.
You mean there's no dog in there? You're ruining it for me, Sharma. You're ruining it for me.
To play the devil's advocate, I will say that there are products on the market that make really big, meaty claims, especially now with the hype going on. There are products coming on really quickly without any IP, just trying to be the same old soy, gluten stuff, but they're making claims, which I think is creating a lot of stigma, you know, so...
So one thing I would say is I think we're on generation 1 of plant-based foods. So if you look at Beyond, if you look at Impossible, if you look at the kind of more well-known plant-based foods, they were trying to hit the taste target, and they were prepared to do it by any means necessary, which means a whole range of ingredients and, you know, ultimately an accusation that they're not as healthy as they ought to be. And I think there's the next generation of products coming through. Well, two things are happening. One is that those well-known brands are going through their own iteration, reformulation. So you're getting Gen 2 for Beyond, you're getting Gen 2 for Impossible. And aside from that, you're getting brands and companies coming in that have sort of learnt from that over-processed development, and they're starting to use fewer raw, kind of more natural ingredients. There's a company in Israel called Rvcs, Rilbites, that uses 6 ingredients, including cranberry, lentil, chickpea, and a few other very kind of normal ingredients. And it's more about the processing of the ingredients so that it ultimately looks and tastes like a beef type product. Very, very few ingredients, very natural ingredients. There's also a company in the US called the Abbott's Butcher, which is also very similar. I think they use 7 ingredients, all very natural, very few, in fact, 0 processed foods, 0 kind of additives, and so on and so forth. It's more about the processing, using kind of a Bueller-type machinery and so on to get there. So I think we're starting to see Gen 2 and Gen 3 coming online, where we're able to hit the taste target that we're aiming for with better quality ingredients, and I think that combination is getting the nutritional profile we're looking for as well as the taste.
I've just got one extra thing to mention with the labelling from a shopper perspective, and I know that some really rigorous research has just been done on that from Food Frontier and Life Health Foods, but so I won't go there, that'll be released shortly. But from Colmar Brunton research, what we found is with consumers in terms of interest to try different alternative proteins and meat alternatives, often when you just kind of very simple explanation of the product itself, there's pretty low interest, but that jacks up by 20-30% when you start to bring in imagery or you describe it as something that leverages familiarity. So a familiar format, a familiar flavour, a familiar image. All of a sudden, you've got doubling your interest proportions.
So consumers have an anchor point. They know what it can be used for. If a consumer gets a product put in front of them and they have no idea whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, or a snack, they're probably not going to take the risk and buy it.
That's right. So familiarity is we really need to leverage that in the Australian market.
I'd like to just ask the next question quickly, which is, when do you guys think that we'll see price parity between conventional meat and alternative plant-based meat? So just give me a number. We've got about 15 seconds to cover that, so 4 seconds each. Just give me a number. When?
Unknown, but as soon as possible, because that could always be one of the barriers for shoppers.
It's a combination of subsidies, supermarket margins, and availability of ingredients.
So how long? Give me a number. What year? Have a guess.
A couple of years, I think.
Cool. Sharma?
Well, I mean, Sunfed's scaling up now. It's all about scale, right? Economies of scale
Yep.
bring the price down. So I don't predict I have a plan for it.
So I'd say now you can always buy cheap crap meat, or you can buy good quality plant-based. It's now. I don't think it's a year or two away.
Good point. Good point. Now, the other one, we're seeing now that there's lots of plant-based meats being released by conventional meat producers. We're seeing meat companies like Vivera in Europe actually exiting the meat industry to concentrate on their plant-based businesses. We even got butchers in the UK selling plant-based meats next to their meat products because their consumers are asking it for them. And now we've got more alternative proteins coming in. Particularly we've got the cell-based meat, which we're going to talk about in the next panel, where you can actually take some animal cells, grow them in fermenters and grow your own meat. Is there space for all the alternative proteins, or particularly plant-based and cell-based meats? Is there room for both, or will one dominate, or next 10 years? What do the panel think?
I personally think there's room for both.
And do you think anyone will dominate?
The ones that taste bad?
I would say that in the next 10 years, plant-based is going to dominate because it's harder for the meat industry to create fear and confusion around plant-based foods because it's considered more natural. Cell-based is going to get a lot of negative press in terms of Frankenstein meat and all this kind of crap. So your average consumer's already turned off by GMO. It's going to be the meat industry is going to create a lot of fear and confusion around cell-based meat, and I think that's going to turn a lot of consumers off. So I think plant-based is going to be the winning proposition, at least in the next decade.
Yep. Thank you.
I'd agree with Andrew, and I do think it's an and proposition, not an or one or the other. And really that proportion will come down to what consumers want.
Yep, exactly. And I think the overall thing for me is I'd love to be here in 10 years' time and look back and say, do we even recognise the meat industry when we look back in 10 years compared to what it is today? I think whatever way it goes, it's going to be so fundamentally different that it's certainly not going to be the same as we see at the moment. Now, so Will, do we have a microphone? Will, for some questions from the audience?
Any questions?
Hi, great panel, thank you. Robin Warner from Melbourne University. Someone raised this with me last week. So what we're doing is creating products that will need to be produced by companies, whereas the consumer can't, the consumer doesn't know how to recreate that product in their home because they are buying a pre-formed product. So and this is probably, it is in relation to cell-based meat, but also whether they can do it with the other plant-based proteins, whether they'll be able to, and obviously it will totally disrupt how we do our cooking at home as well, in terms of we're used to doing things a certain way. This is what this person was saying to me last week. So can you see where the inherent ingredient is taken home and the consumer can recreate what is being created by these companies in their own home?
So I think what we're asking is, will plant-based alternatives be able to recreate what we're already used to using conventional meat products? Is that what we're asking?
I think that's hugely important. I think that's exactly what we're... Yeah. The base ingredients or the... I think what supermarkets are going to start selling, what they're already selling, is that base ingredient, that base protein, the minced chicken, to make whatever meal they'd like out of it. Is that what the question? Hang on one sec.
Can you make the 9 ingredients at home to get the same texture and flavour without relying on buying a product?
It'd be very difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Oh,
Other
got one over
questions
there,
from
a couple
the
over there.
Thank you, panel. I'm Subramani from Monash University. I just have a question regarding the quality of protein. So, animal protein contains all the essential amino acids. So, will we be able to recreate the same in plant-based proteins? Thank you.
Go on, it's yours.
I think we already have plant proteins that have the essential amino acids, things like moringa and pea protein to a certain extent as well. It's low on some of them, but it's there. Essentially, you don't eat meat by itself. You do have other things around it, so you will, in a meal, get all the amino acids you're looking for, I think, would be my answer.
And I think, there's nothing to stop plant-based products being fortified where necessary anyway. So if there's not a complete amino acid profile, then we can look at supplementation, and there's been a couple of studies showing that you can get everything you need from plant-based proteins if you eat the right combination, which is not always easy.
Well,
So
dal
I think
and
we're going
rice,
to be
you get
looking
your...
at...
You
Sorry?
eat dal and rice, you get your full amino acids.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
What you probably won't get from your plant-based versions is the antibiotics and the other things that you're getting in the food system, and the salmonella and the other kind of crap you're getting with meat. But it may take away from the flavour. But hey,
Ripped off there, Andrew. Ripped off. We had one more question. Yes.
Yeah, hi, Patrick Watson. I can make a series of statements and hopefully finish with a question. So I recently had the pleasure of attending a conference in Amsterdam in June on the future of plant protein. Now, one of the things they were talking about at that conference was that the current proteins used in plant-based meats are not really the appropriate proteins for absorption into the human body and the access to the correct nutritional profile. And through a series of breeding programs, and this comes from the Good Food Institute in America, that in the next 18 months, all types of new types of plant proteins specifically developed for the application in plant-based foods will be coming into the market. Now, the point I wanted to make around that was we, in 2019, I like to call it the year of vegan junk food. We're copying junk food from around the world. We have hamburgers, we have chicken strips, we have chicken nuggets, or non-chicken if you want to call it that, which essentially for me as a chef is junk food, all deep fried. And you find that when people are alienated from a food culture, become more remote from the source of their food, that more and more people adapt to junk food. And this is one of the directions that I find plant-based foods are taking us, that we are taking people further away from the base of the access of their food. Now, with animals, anyone can grow an animal, but no one here can make a plant-based hamburger at home, not that I know of anyway, or chicken strips. So I find, this is one of my statements, that I find that in terms of food culture, as a great supporter of plant-based foods, but in the concept that we're currently delivering into the market, I think we're underselling to the customer. We're underestimating who our customer is, and we're also degrading our food culture. Now, the question I have on top of that is, what do you think the future of plant foods are if we can't escape this whole paradigm of naming it after meat alternatives?
Well, your question is very different from your statement. So essentially, just to correct a few things, there are a couple plant alternatives that are playing in the processed meat market, and good for them, and they're working. But there are also meat alternatives like ours, which is actually nutritionally superior to animal protein. You said the digestibility, how it absorbs the proteins, all of that is way up there. And we actually create a chunk of meat. It's not a patty. It's nothing like that. You take it and you cook it exactly how you want it, like as a chef. So you would go take it, cook it exactly like you would cook chicken. So just that. But around naming it, labeling is all about the consumer. Okay? So when a consumer picks up a packet, do they understand how to use this product? So right now, there's a transitionary period. So when they see something like chicken-free chicken, or they see something like a burger, Beyond Burger patty or whatever, they know exactly how to use it. That's the whole point of a label. That's what I think.
I'd agree. I think it's baby steps where we are right now. It's kind of introducing this idea, and consumers need those linkages. They need those baby steps to leverage the familiar to explore into a new space. So, the types of foods that we're seeing, I understand what you mean about our food culture, but I think this is just the beginning to leverage the familiar, and then from where we go from here is to be seen. But I think it's just the start.
Anyone else?
I agree. I think we need to almost move past even responding to those kind of questions a lot of the time, because they're a common question we get in this space all the time, and they don't necessarily need to be answered anymore. I think they've been asked and answered so many times that we can move on from that.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
So, have we got time for one more question, Will, or do we need to?
I think that's a wrap, I reckon.
That's
Great
a wrap.
question.
Well, thanks very much. So
Thank you,
please
folks.
say thank you to our panel for that.
So
And,
thank you. Yes. So thank you very much. Give everyone a round of applause. Thank you, Tony, for a very slick moderation. The panel for a very heated and fantastic discussion. My key takeaway from that was that, as Sharma was saying, is categorising whether you're a vegan, flexitarian, vegetarian, or a meat eater is actually quite divisive, and at the consumer level, but also at the industry level in terms of the role that it plays for the whole industry. So the way I could sum that up is we got to create great fucking tasting chicken or meat that is good for your health. Yeah. So thank you very much. Give it up again.
thank you.